just an act of child abuse or neglect, even though allegedly it certainly is that. They are calling this murder. Jessica and Damien are charged with second-degree murder, torture, and 3 counts of second-degree child abuse. One of the child abuse charges, by the way, is related to the health and safety of Casper's 5-year-old sister. We told you already that police had concerns about her, and they say she was, quote, morbidly overweight and dirty. The attorneys for the O'Briens are slated to be in court on July 2nd. Casper was 4'2" at the time of his death, which makes his body mass index 71.7. And according to the CDC, a 7-year-old's BMI should be 16. Joining us now to talk more about this case is retired Detective Commander Will Svilar. I just keep thinking of 255 pounds, and it's just like how, like for the parents in the police records that we have, acting as if nothing was wrong, they were surprised. I mean, you have people who have worked, I think it's the medical examiner that says these are some of the worst sores I've ever seen, like on a body, and it's just really hard to comprehend all of this. But what do you make of this being now a second-degree murder case?
I think that's an appropriate charge, and I think they had a way to log that charge until the ME came up with the ruling. 255 pounds at 7 years old. How could that even be?
Right.
It's almost like what comes to mind, and it's gross to think about this. It comes to mind is how they feed the geese when they do the foie gras. Almost like you're just funneling food into this poor kid's mouth. The neglect charges were easy. They said to take one look around the place, the condition of the place, the condition of the other child that was found there. That's easy. But the second-degree murder charge, you had to wait for the ME, and it's appropriate.
100%. And you just think of like what stood out to me in a lot of the police reports is how, especially Jessica O'Brien, the mom, allegedly admits that she had seen a doctor as recently as last month. She admitted that they had health insurance, $20 copay, because her husband has, what they describe as he works in IT. So that's like solid work that he has with health benefits. She said that there were no financial constraints on the family. Like this was not a situation where you say, well, the family fell on hard times. Like she said money was coming in. And then on top of it, the part for me is she that morning says the night before the dog had a stroke and she was going to call the vet. And it's like, here's a dog having a health issue and she's calling a veterinarian, but then her son is at this incredible weight and has a ton of health issues. And yet he hadn't seen a doctor for 2 years. How does that, when it comes to, and kind of I list all of that to like ask the question of like, when you're trying to prove that this was not just a neglect case, that this was far worse than that, how did those details factor into the argument you can make in talking to a prosecutor if you're an investigator about what you found?
Here's what comes to mind to me: wanton and willful. The behavior on those parents is wanton and willful. You don't put a kid in school. They said he was nonverbal and autistic, never had him diagnosed. The other child is also morbidly obese and wandering around unclothed. This is intentional behavior by these parents. And you have to talk about the intentional part of the behavior. Torture. Torture was on one of the charges. Now, torture, what could that be? Could that be force feeding this kid? I think it could be. But you have to show that it is wanton and willful. And because there is another charge. In Illinois, there's a charge of child neglect resulting in death, but it's not murder. And if you go forward with the murder charge, you take into consideration the ME saying these are some of the worst bed sores I've ever seen. And they've seen a lot of them. Especially when you deal with like elderly in nursing homes that don't get moved and things like that. So I think the prosecutor has a strong case, and I think law enforcement put together a good case to say it wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just not paying attention. It was willfully keeping the kid from a doctor, willfully, not providing the kid a atmosphere or an environment where he could thrive or even get better. So I think that charge is appropriate. And again, this is what you have to prove: wanton and willful behavior.
It also stood out to me that the story seemed to change a little bit, and police made note of that in the report, where she was somewhat aware of some of the health issues that Casper had when it came to some of these rashes and sores. And I guess initially she had said, I think they were there for just a couple of days. And then for a medical examiner to look at that, like those aren't things that just show up over 24 hours. And then when she is being interrogated this month, she said it was more of a month. And I know it's been several months since all of this took place, but like the story starts to change a little bit there. She also alleged that at one point in her life, she was sexually assaulted by a doctor, and that led to her having a distrust of doctors. I'm not one to say whether or not that actually happened, but she herself saw a doctor last month, she said. And then on top of that, and this was infuriating, she said she really just didn't want to go to the doctor because you wait in the waiting room for a long time, and then you see the doctor for 5 minutes and they say your son's okay, and then goes home. Like, the fact that the story changes so much does not look great for her as well, if all of that is true.
The only story that never changes is the truth. When the truth is always the truth. When you start seeing the changes in the story, you're seeing justification of bad behavior. She talks about, well, the kid's filthy because he never liked water, so I wiped him down with baby wipes. Come on. And on top of everything, I don't trust doctors. Why is he 255? I don't care if you don't trust a doctor. Why is that kid 255 pounds? And how did we miss it? Where do they live? And what type of neighborhood do they live where nobody sees this? Nobody wonders where these kids are. Are their grandparents? The kid went to the doctor 2 years ago. They're mandated reporters at the doctor. But again, the kid was 150 pounds lighter 2 years ago.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like the weight, and like people watching this episode are like, dude, we probably get it, because like I'm just saying, it's so hard to comprehend. I mean, 255 pounds is an NFL linebacker. This kid was 7 years old and he was 4'2". And it's just, you do see some pictures from 2022, I think 2023, on Facebook, and he looks like a big kid, but he doesn't look like that weight number that's been alleged in this case. And so like there is part of this of like, you hear some of the or read some of the excuses in the police report, and it's like, oh, I probably should have done a little bit more here. Oh, I wish I had known what was going on. And it's like, you cannot, and I'm sure for a jury, if this was to go to trial, they will see a picture of his body. Like, it has to be way more shocking than any image that is out there right now to understand how someone that young would weigh that much.
32 years on a police department working murders, most of those 32 years. I've seen a lot of things. I never saw anything like that. I mean, I've seen neglect cases, I've seen abuse and baby murders, but I have never seen anything like this.
When it comes to some of these hoarding cases, because it was also apparent that the smell in this house was terrible. I mean, one officer wrote he couldn't tell if it was wood floors or carpet because it was just that dirty inside of this house. Like, as someone, like, when you have responded to a hoarding case like that, like I know the smell must be terrible and like you're just kind of taking it in, but like, what are some of the things in so much chaos that you're looking for to gather evidence? What's it like to gather evidence in an environment like that?
Here's the thing you think about. You think about insect infestation, rodent infestation, and you have it. I assure you, you have it in this house. Plus, you can't move. The inability to move around. There's fire hazards. There's all these things that you do document. You write all this stuff down to build your case, and you photograph it and you videotape it. And it's all things that lead to the injurious environment. And that is, I mean, I've had a couple of cases where it took us a minute to get to the victim because you had to climb through garbage.
Man. And it's just, yeah. And it comes across that there was just, you just wonder how even people, apparently there were 4 dogs in the house too, which is, and then there was the mom, the dad, and then an uncle who is not facing charges. But you have to wonder what his level of awareness was of what was going on. But again, no charges there as of yet. And then Casper had a 5-year-old daughter who is also, or a sister, excuse me, and there is a neglect charge related to her condition because it was not something that police say was healthy either. Moving forward, like looking at the timeline it took to get to this point. So Casper O'Brien dies on November 4th, 2025. His parents are arrested, I believe it was the 23rd of June. What do you make of the amount of time it took from the morning that they arrive at this house to now being in a situation where both parents have been arrested?
I think it doesn't surprise me that it took that long. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. Again, we're not trying to prove a neglect charge. That pretty much proves itself. We're trying to prove a murder charge. So you're going to need everything. And they're not going anywhere. You know where they are. You've removed the 5-year-old. She's got a shot now, maybe at being healthy again and living a normal life. but you better make sure you got all your ducks in a row so you can get that murder case charged. So it doesn't surprise me it took that long.
And then just when it comes to, as someone who's investigated, hoarding case, neglect cases, because it goes to this overall question that I don't think that we can effectively answer, but still, like, how does something like this happen? How does a home get to this point? Like, what have you seen in your career, like a neglect case like this? How does it get to the point, even for this one, as unique and terrible as it may be, how does a home get into the condition that apparently this one was in Flint Township, Michigan? It
didn't start 7 years ago. It didn't start 5 years ago when they had these kids. This is something that's been going on for a long time. To accumulate that much junk, that much garbage, it was going on long before that. So those kids were born into that environment. And it only gets worse. It doesn't get better. But it's not something that took 7 years. It took longer than that.
Because what do you make of the fact that he does seem, I'm not going to say he was healthy. I mean, I don't know his medical records, Casper's, but like in 2022, 2023, he looks like a big kid. And then you have this 2-year period where suddenly he has gained weight, which like just defies what you think would even be possible for someone that young.
I know that she said something about, well, his diet consisted of carbonated or sparkling soda and potato chips. It's not possible.
Right.
It's the amount of calories you have to pump into a body. And then you get to a certain weight where you need X amount of calories to maintain that weight. I don't know what was going on in that house, but good Lord.
You actually bring up a really good point, because in the police report, I think what they allege is like a large bag of potato chips, a large fry, and then this like ice water, but it's like sugary carbonated soda pretty much. And it's like that just still doesn't add up to hit that particular weight. Like it just seems like there has to be more there.
You would have to have a constant drip of carbonated sugar soda, almost like an IV, to put that many calories in your body to gain that kind of weight. It's got to be forced. It's almost like force feeding. I can't imagine anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been alleged as of yet, but you also think of like, again, like for an adult who's maybe like 6 feet tall, the amount of work you would have to put in over a long period of time to like reach that number is just like, it just defies everything that at least I thought, and I'm not an expert on it by any means, but like how that would even be possible. So like, we'll see what happens next in this story. This boy deserves such a better life than what he got in the short time that he was with us, just 7 years old. We'll see what happens next. The attorneys for the parents are expected in court tomorrow, I believe. So we'll see what happens next in this case, as both Jessica and Damian O'Brien facing charges, including second-degree murder. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar, formerly with the Chicago Police Department. It's always great to have you here on Law and Crime. I know you have your own podcast now. People can find it here on YouTube. What do people need to know about it?
We have 4 people, myself, 32 years in homicide in Chicago Police, 2 excellent homicide detectives, Danny Stover and Tim Murphy, and Maureen O'Connell, who's a 25-year FBI vet who's just brilliant. And it's called Big City Crime Inside the Red Tape. And what we mean when we say inside the red tape is we've been inside the red tape. That's the inner crime scene perimeter. So we're just trying to give our perspective on crimes that are happening around the world and around the country, just from what we, with our experience, have seen from inside the red tape.
And it's great insight. I mean, you do it so well here on this show, but for so many of us who have never been inside the red tape, I've certainly been outside of it, covered a lot of crime scenes. It's always fascinating to hear how all of you in law enforcement are able to bring these cases together. And as we see in the story, like we're talking about here, really tough situations as well that you have to deal with on the way to, potentially get a conviction in a lot of these tough cases. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar with the Chicago Police Department. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us today. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.